I'll never forget the drive back from my uncle's funeral. It was a long, solitary journey across state lines with nothing but my thoughts to keep me company. I'd been dreading this trip for weeks, as Uncle John had been fighting a losing battle for some time, but as I hit the open road, I felt this sense of relief wash right over me. The funeral had been a difficult ordeal. I was just glad to be leaving it all behind. The drive itself was relatively painless, just took a long time. I had to cut across state lines in numerous counties for a total of a 10-hour trip. Not the worst thing in the world, but for an older guy like me, I found none of it appealing. Oregon, Idaho, many other northwestern states are mostly just ugly, nothing really to look at, with huge stretches of straight highway that seem to go on forever. I will say, though, I was in better spirits than normal because it was the return trip, and those always feel shorter for some reason. As I drove, the landscape outside my window changed from a bustling city to rolling hills and, finally, to the vast expanse of the Oregon Plains. I'd been driving for hours. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. I was making good time. I expected to be home a little before midnight. I settled in, cracked a soda, and prepared for the most boring finish to a drive I could ever imagine. As I approached the border, I noticed a sign for a newly built rest stop. I'd been driving for hours. I could use a break. I pulled off the highway and into the parking lot, expecting to find a clean and welcoming facility, but as I stepped out of my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just off. It was sundown at this point. The glow was rapidly fading, leaving me with a heavy twilight. The external lights of the facility kicked on and showed me the different routes into the bathroom. The rest stop itself was completely deserted, except for a few cars parked sporadically around the lot. The building was modern and sleek, but it seemed to loom over me, casting an unending shadow in the fading light. I tried to shake off the feeling in my knees, telling myself I was just tired from this long drive, but as I approached the entrance, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A group of men were just lounging against the wall, eyeing me with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. They weren't dressed in costumes or anything, didn't represent a specific color, but it was obvious that they were gang-related. Tatted up, shaved heads, a mix of Latino and white, bandanas draped around their necks or hanging out of their pockets. This was definitely the root of the dreadful sensation that I had upon arriving. I nodded a brief hello that was not returned to me. I tried to avoid eye contact after that, but I could feel their gaze following me as I walked toward the entrance. I quickened my pace, my heart racing with anticipation. I'd heard horror stories from different folks over the years, border encounters that could be fatal, but the gangs and cartels were all over in the towns and cities, not just confined to the area that I was in. I made it my mission to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside the bathroom. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered like fireflies in the darkness. The air inside was stale and heavy, thick with the scent of disinfectant and something else, something sweet and acidic. I wrinkled my nose, trying to place the smell, but it lingered just out of reach. Honestly, it was probably a vape exhale, I just hadn't placed it yet. Vaping was still kind of new when this happened to me. As I made my way to the urinal, I looked around and found I was alone. Thank God, not that I have a shy bladder or anything, but if there had been anyone waiting for me in the restroom, my only option would be to run. I figured the crowd outside was waiting to snatch me up. No one in the bathroom meant there wasn't any kind of plan in place. I remember I saw an average Joe out in the parking lot, just hoped to God their presence would keep the peace. I stood there for only 30 seconds, but it felt much longer. The whole time I was just waiting to hear gunfire spark to life beyond that brick wall and that metal door. I imagined the gang shooting the whole property up, every building, every car, before peeling onto the highway and just disappearing forever. What I heard wasn't gunfire, though. It was even scarier. The door behind me banged open, and I could hear a couple of people speaking in Spanish. I didn't even bother to turn around. If they were those gang members and wanted my attention, they would get it. Still, I could see them in the reflection of the mirror. They were dressed in black, their faces obscured by bandanas and sunglasses. They seemed to be sizing me up like a piece of meat. They leaned on the wall and just stared holes into my back. "What's up, old man?" one of them asked me. I didn't respond, just did my best to ignore them. "Hey, Poppy, don't make that mistake again." "I asked you a question," the guy repeated. "Just stopping to use the bathroom on my way back from my uncle's funeral," I explained, hoping to score some pity points for why I was out there in the first place. "Oh, a funeral. We had no idea," he said back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. At this point, I knew I was in trouble. I zipped up and checked my pockets, but no dice. No nothing but my car keys, which I guess was a small victory in itself. Still, I wasn't even sure I'd locked my car in that moment. "We're gonna tune you up, Toe," that same kid said. His friend spoke to him quickly in Spanish, and they both had a quick laugh. My stomach turned to mush, bottomed out through my ass. The first open threat I'd received in a long time, and boy, was I sure these kids were going to be good for it. I was kicking myself over and over, saying, "What the hell? Why would you even stop here in a place you know is dangerous?" I felt like I created this entire situation myself, and honestly, I was right. "Look at me," one of them sneered. I did as I was told. In that moment, I saw my only option. On the back side of the bathroom door was a deadbolt, a big, heavy one. I looked over the door at a glance, and it seemed like thick, heavy metal. Locking the door was going to be my only ticket if this didn't clear up immediately. I shook my head, just trying to play cool. "Just stopped for a break, guys," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear creeping up in my throat. I have no idea why I repeated my earlier statement, probably just a result of the panic pulsing underneath my skin. They said some more stuff to me, but I don't remember any of it. The blood pumping in my ears was way too loud. The men nodded, their faces expressionless, then turned and walked out of the bathroom, leaving me feeling uneasy and unsure. I waited for a moment, hoping someone else would come in, but the bathroom just remained empty. The only sound was the hum of the vending machines and the distant rumble of cars on the highway. In this moment, I completely forgot about my plan with the lock. Just wanted to get in my car and leave. The fact that they weren't kicking my ass seemed like a good sign, right? I washed my hands and, believe it or not, washed my face. Did everything I could to just shake off my nerves. Finally, I emerged from the bathroom, my heart racing with anticipation. As I stepped out into the evening air, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The parking lot was empty, except for my car, which was now surrounded by that same group of men, their faces twisted with cruel grins as they rummaged through my belongings. "Hey, what's going on here?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice firm despite the fear creeping up in my throat. Looking back, I have no idea what I was thinking. Just kind of rolled up on autopilot throughout that chaos. I'm not a tough guy, pretty non-confrontational, but I'll be damned if I was going to stand idle and be robbed without at least saying something. I said it loud, hoping I could get the attention of some of the other folks that I saw around earlier. Somehow, in just the 60 seconds I was in the bathroom, that entire parking lot had cleared out end to end. Not a soul stirred in my direction, none except the gangbangers prying through my stuff. The men then turned to face me, their eyes lit up like it was Christmas Day. "Just having a look around, amigo," one of them sneered, holding up my wallet. I kept it in the center console on long drives, as it's a thick, old leather thing and starts to upset my back if I sit on it for too long. I felt a surge of panic as I realized the extent of their thievery. "Give that back," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I actually felt. Sweat started to bead and run down my brow, cheeks, and chest despite the cool evening air. The men just laughed, their voices echoing off the walls as they continued to rummage through my car. I knew I had to act fast, but my mind was blank, unable to come up with a plan. As the men closed in around me, their eyes never leaving mine, I shouted, "All right, I'm calling the police." This time I got their full attention. They immediately fanned out, started closing in on me. Apparently, my threat was enough to turn their full attention on me now, at least until they could check me for a cell phone or just beat me into the ground. I raised up my hands in front of me and started to backpedal as the last form of defense. Too late for that, man. You know what's going to happen now. I turned and ran at a full sprint. For an old fart like me, I was hustling pretty good. I think I even surprised the gangsters because they all froze up for a second before they started chasing me, immediately giving me enough time to get ahead of them. I retreated into the bathroom, locking the door behind me as the gang members continued to chase me. They pounded on the door, demanding I open up, before they started smashing it with big rocks that they found outside. The door didn't bend inward or anything, but it buckled with the constant barrage of pressure. Soon the stones started flying through the upper windows and skylights, glass shattering all around me. I'm still partially convinced they were discharging firearms, but the place was so loud and I was in such a panic, I couldn't really say for sure. Fortunately, the building was all brick and cinder blocks, concrete in between, so I was actually kind of safe in there, as long as they didn't get that door open. I moved into the back stall and just hunkered down in the cleanest place available, just in case any stray rounds ricocheted in. Eventually, they must have gotten bored and moved off from the building, but I could still hear their voices at a distance. I could hear them laughing and shouting, the sound of glass shattering and metal crunching as they tore through my belongings. I felt a sense of hopelessness just wash over me. Trapped and helpless, I listened to my car being destroyed. My threat to call the police was a bold lie. My phone, my whole life was inside that car, so I was doomed to wait it out for as long as I had to. Some of them came back to the bathroom door, banging on it with their fists and hollering insults and threats again. "You think you can hide from us?" Another one of them sneered. "Come see your new car," another one hollered, then another string of insults. "Come on, Teal, you can't take all night. If you open up the door, we won't pop the tires." I cowered in the corner, my heart racing with fear as the banging and shouting continued. It seemed like an eternity before they finally gave up and just took off, leaving me shaken and alone. This time, though, there weren't any distant voices. It actually sounded like they loaded up and left. I could even hear a vehicle drifting out of the parking lot. I still had my keys in my pocket, so it couldn't have been mine. Someone must have come to pick them up, or they had a car hidden somewhere. Either way, I was very glad to experience silence beyond those block walls. I waited for what felt like an hour, listening intently for any sign of their return. The parking lot was silent, the only sound the distant hum of cars on the highway outside. I took inventory of the bathroom, the shattered glass all over the floor, the rocks resting among the carnage. It's a crazy amount of damage, so I figured my car could be way worse. Finally, I worked up the courage to open up the door, survey the damage. It was dark, but the rest stop was lit up with blinding light poles, or at least a few of them. Some were dark with broken glass piled at the base. Those guys had managed to break some of the lights out. There was graffiti too, all over the rest stop building and signs around the area. I took very quiet steps as I navigated my way back to my vehicle. My car was a complete wreck. Windshield was smashed and half of my belongings were gone. One of the tires was flat and the body was dented and scratched. They even hit my interior with the cans of spray paint, wrote messages for me all over the seats and dashboard. Most of it was in Spanish, so I couldn't even read it. I just stood there, looked over the wreckage for a long time, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to leave before making a report of some kind, but didn't have a way to do that. I felt a wave of despair wash over me as I realized the extent of the destruction. The thing probably wouldn't even start, and that was if I could even get the key in the ignition. As I stood there, trying to process everything that happened, other cars began to pull into the parking lot. The drivers got out, eyeing my car with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I felt a sense of shame and embarrassment, knowing I'd been so helpless to stop those gang members, but they were also eyeballing the destroyed rest stop building behind me. They probably assumed that I was the culprit, being the only person here. I looked out of my mind, I'm sure I did. One of those bystanders, a kind-looking older man, approached me and offered me his phone to call the police. I took it gratefully, then explained everything that happened to the dispatcher on the other end. But as I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. The old man listened as I explained everything and just nodded along. He had an old revolver in a leather holster on his hip, probably just a 22 or a 38, but still what I would have given to have that old man there with me just an hour or two earlier. When the police finally showed up, they took a statement and looked over my car, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. "Just a case of vandalism, sir," one of them said, shrugging. "We'll file a report," but wouldn't hold out much hope of catching those perpetrators. I felt a surge of anger and frustration, knowing I'd been let down by the very people who were supposed to protect me. As I watched the police drive away from me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disillusionment with humanity. If this was how people treated each other, then what was the point of even trying? The other drivers in the parking lot continued to eye me with suspicion, but still, I couldn't shake that feeling, that horrible sensation that had settled over me. The world is a dark and violent place, and I was just a small, helpless part of it all, and just as I suspected, it wouldn't even turn over. I had to ask that same old man if he knew of a towing service nearby, which he did. This guy turned out to be somewhat of a local. He lived in the next town over. He called a friend of his who sent a wrecker out, hauled me and the car back to town. 9,000 worth of repairs later, I was able to drive the car out of the shop. Thankfully, my insurance paid for most of it, but those punk gangsters were never brought to justice. And for obvious reasons, I travel much differently nowadays. As we drove away from the familiar landscape of home, Lisa and I felt a sense of excitement and adventure wash right over us. We were headed to Maine to visit my grandmother, and that long drive ahead of us seemed like a thrilling journey into the unknown. But as the hours passed and the miles flew by, our enthusiasm began to wane. The GPS had led us off the highway onto a series of winding back roads. We found ourselves lost in a sea of identical trees and twisting turns. We hadn't even crossed into Maine yet, and already we were running into trouble. I'd put a little too much faith into that GPS navigator. I didn't question it when it told us to veer off that country back road and off into the middle of nowhere. The madness really came to light when the navigator failed to lead us back out into anything familiar. It just kept looping over and over again throughout that same area. It's almost something like out of a nightmare, but this was just part of the adventure, and Lisa and I were just happy to be together for it. At first, we tried to just laugh it off, joking about our navigation skills and the quirks of a rural roadway, but as the sun began to set and the shadows deepened, our worry started to boil over into panic. We'd been driving for hours, our gas tank was running perilously low. The road seemed to stretch on forever and ever, curving and twisting in every direction with no sign of civilization in sight. Being lost was honestly no trouble to me. It was the low gas tank that had me sick with anxiety. We hadn't seen a house, a farm, a building of any kind. There definitely wasn't a gas station out here. And we'd been up and down literally every stretch of the road that county had to offer. We even tried to use landmarks like hill crests and tall trees to guide us, but nothing really was working. We could have had a map and a compass, but again, I really don't think that would have helped us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing as I tried to figure out our predicament. We'd taken a wrong turn somewhere, but where? And how could we possibly find our way back to the highway? The darkness seemed to press in around us, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I could feel Lisa's anxiety radiating from the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the GPS screen as if willing it to produce a solution. As the minutes ticked by, our panic grew and grew. We were truly alone out here with no phone signal and no hope of rescue. The road seemed to shift and twist like a living entity, determined to keep us lost. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest when the gas light ticked on, told me we were down to our last gallon. Something like 18 miles of drifting. The car itself literally jittered when the light came on. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. "It's okay, I promise. This could be way, way worse," I said. "Well, say that. What the hell is wrong with you?" She shot back. I nodded and said, "Sorry, I'm just trying to be positive. I promise, though, everything is okay." "Oh, what are we going to do?" she prodded. Well, I don't know. First, we're gonna relax and just think, I explained. Finally, with a sense of resignation, I pulled over to the side of the road. We held hands and just took very deep, shuddering breaths as we watched the woodland around us. Some rabbits scampered by, an owl seemed to chase them, then a fox went darting in the other direction. In the moment, it was kind of fun and gave us something to admire, something to take our mind off the situation at hand. We continued talking for a bit, then started to reason through our predicament. It was easy, there were very few options. We would have to sleep in the car until sunrise, hoping the light of day would reveal a way out of this labyrinth nightmare. It was the only thing that made sense. Considering how low on fuel we were, we couldn't really afford to waste it driving back and forth in the dark. I put the seats down in the back, made us this little place to cuddle, nestled among our belongings like some duffel bags and coats. We even had some dry food to snack on that really perked up our mood. As we settled in for the night, darkness continued closing in around us like a shroud. I couldn't shake that feeling that we were being watched by something. The trees seemed to loom over, their branches creaking ominously in the wind. I remembered those animals earlier, realized that, we were being watched. The animals around here probably hadn't seen a car just stop and spend the night on the road like that ever before. The animals also offered this sense of security, in the sense that if there were animals around here, things had to be pretty normal, right? If there were rabbits and foxes, there likely weren't any big predators. Still, we were in the middle of nowhere. Neither of us were accustomed to that. We're sleeping in a car, which gave us no sense of privacy or security, and on top of it all, we didn't know where we were going and how to get out in the morning. We were completely at the mercy of the unknown, and that was a terrifying place to be. We huddled together in the darkness, trying to get some sleep, but unable to shake that feeling of being watched. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant rumble of an airplane overhead. But then, without warning, the silence was shattered by a series of footsteps circling the car. Lisa clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she whispered. I don't know," I replied, my voice barely audible, "but we need to stay calm. Whatever it was, it carried on down the road, stopped, and then came back to the vehicle." My eyebrows came together in confusion. It sounded like a person, just 2 feet dusting up the dirt road, but as they got closer, I was sure of it. I remained frozen next to Lisa, head down in the darkness. The windows loomed over us like great, wicked magnifying glasses. The thing, the person, whatever it was, stopped maybe 15 feet away from us. Then again, it walked further down the road for a second time, so we couldn't hear it anymore. "What the..." was all Lisa managed to get out. Right then, a howl echoed throughout the darkness. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard before, a primal scream that seemed to come from the very depths of the forest. No way it was a person. Too deep and throaty, too wild sounding. We tensed up but also relaxed. We were relieved it was just a coyote milling around and not some kind of murderer. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "That is terrifying." "I know," I agreed, my mind still racing. "Should we just go?" Just as I said those words, I could hear those footsteps again, except this time they were running toward the car, and I mean a full-on sprint. Then a heavy sounding thump sounded on the roof of the car, making us both jump out of our skin. It was as if someone were banging on the car with their fist, the blows coming in rapid succession. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound brave, but feeling anything but that. I was on the verge of hyperventilating, but having Lisa there kept me grounded and focused. I couldn't let anyone in the car or hurt her at any cost. "Who's out there?" I hollered out again. The thumping then stopped for a moment. It was just silence, except I could hear this weirdo breathing, hot and heavy, and I could see it was now fogging up the glass. It must have been from the running and beating up on the car. Next, we heard the sound of someone running away into the darkness, those footsteps just fading into the distance. Lisa and I looked at each other, our eyes wide with fear. "Okay, we need to get out of here," I said, my voice firm this time. "We've got to risk the gas tank," she agreed. No questions asked. Lisa immediately started folding up all the bedding and organizing it as quickly as she could. I climbed into the driver's seat and undid the emergency brake, fired up the engine, and just waited for Lisa. After a minute, she climbed up next to me and put her seatbelt on. Without another word, we started the car and pulled away from the side of the road, driving as fast as we could without headlights. We didn't see anything as we drove, but we didn't need to. We knew whatever had been messing with us was still out there, watching and waiting. The moon had lit up the area. We were already sporting pretty heavy, solid night vision as we'd been looking through the windows without light for a couple of hours at that point. After a few miles, we pulled over again, this time in a small clearing surrounded by trees. We tried to sleep, but our minds were racing with the thoughts of what had just happened. We knew we couldn't stay here for very long, but for now it was the best that we could do. As we lay there in the darkness, I couldn't shake that feeling again. That feeling of being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on us from somewhere up in the shadows. Again, I knew we had to keep moving. I had to keep driving until we found our way back to some semblance of civilization. But for now, we were trapped, alone and vulnerable in the darkness of that forest. I figured driving 4 miles away without any headlights on was a pretty safe bet. It'd be hard to follow on foot as it were, but in the dark, no less, it might be impossible. Getting off the main road had given us a little confidence boost as well, as we nestled in the car in that tree thicket. There was a road in each direction that we could use for an exit. We huddled up in the back and got the worst sleep imaginable, but ultimately, nothing else weird happened the rest of that night. As we woke up the following morning, the sunlight streaming through the windshield revealed a sight that made our blood run cold. Greasy handprints smeared the glass, a taunting reminder that someone had indeed been messing with us throughout the night. Lisa let out a terrified whisper. Oh my God. They were right there. Super weird to see. I couldn't tell if it was from when we parked on the road, or if this weirdo had indeed found us out there behind the trees. I got out with a water bottle and a rag from the trunk, did my best to just try to clean it off, but I can't express to you how grimy and greasy this person's hands had to be. It's absolutely disgusting. I could see every impression and imprint from their palm. I started the car, the engine sputtering a bit as we crept down that dirt road. The fuel light had been on for hours, and I knew we were running on fumes, maybe 12 miles left to go, but we had to keep moving. As we drove, the landscape began to look familiar. We could see the main road sneaking its way through the hills. A sign ahead beckoned, promising a town just 9 miles away. The gas station symbol, it seemed like a lifeline. No way, Lisa said. How the hell did we miss this? I have no idea. I don't even think we passed through here, I said. I don't remember going through that clearing before. It's okay, we're gonna make it, she cheered. But as we passed the sign, a figure appeared on the shoulder of the road. A young man, dirty and unkempt, with a wild look in his eyes. He made this weird face as we passed, his lips curling up with a snarl, and then he started to chase us. No holds barred, sprinting down the road. He looked absolutely crazy, and I mean literally. I don't even think he had shoes on, but he was easily clearing up to 15 mech. Oh my God, he's following us! Lisa screamed. I hit the gas, and the car sprung forward as we sped away from that weirdo, but the low gas tank had us sputtering to accelerate. We didn't dare look back, our eyes fixed on the road ahead as we devoured the miles. Finally, we crested a hill, and a town came into view. We saw the gas station, a haven of normalcy inside the surreal nightmare. As we pulled into the station, we both let out a sigh of relief. We'd made it, we were safe. But as we filled up the tank and grabbed some coffee, we couldn't shake that feeling that we just experienced something truly sinister. That guy back there, Lisa said, her voice still shaking. It had to be the one that messed with us last night, right? I nodded, my mind reeling with the implications. He must have been watching us, waiting for us to leave. But why? Lisa asked, her eyes wild with disbelief. Why would someone do that to us? Does he live out there? I shook my head, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. I don't know, but I know one thing for sure. We're never driving through those woods again. We both laughed, got back into the car, and reoriented the GPS. I got a map just to be sure this time. Even then, we only drove a couple of hours that day before we got a motel in some quaint little town, so we could actually get some real sleep. I decided my grandma could wait a couple of hours longer, especially after that night we just had. As we set out on the road trip, the sun was shining bright, and the excitement was palpable. My little sister Sophie was bouncing with anticipation in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. My parents, worn out from the early morning start, exchanged a tired glance in the front seat. I, the oldest son, sat next to Sophie, trying to muster up some enthusiasm for this long drive ahead. We were doing this lengthy road trip with a number of goals along the way, visiting some various national parks, seeing the monuments, and visiting my mom's sister. We were in between destinations, just seeing the sights, or lack thereof, when I remember, but mostly just teasing my sister. My mom and dad sang along to something on the radio. Our trusty family car, a weathered sedan with countless miles underneath its belt, chugged along the highway. At first, it seemed like any other road trip. The usual arguments over music, snacks, and whose turn it was to control the air conditioning. But as the day wore on, a sense of unease crept in. The engine began to sputter, the electronics flickering like fireflies in the dashboard. Now, this was very unusual. In fact, my sister and I were so young at the time, we'd never really experienced any kind of car failure. I remember a cold sweat all over my body, thinking the car would explode, engulf us in flames at any moment. Too many action movies in the 80s. Still, the chugging in the car, the fireworks across the dash, all of it made me feel like throwing up in the moment. "Dad, what's going on?" Sophie asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Just a minor glitch, sweetie," my father replied, his brow furrowed in concern. "We'll get it checked out at the next stop." But as we continued driving, the car's erratic behavior only got worse. The radio crackled with static, the air conditioning blew hot air. My parents continued exchanging increasingly irritable glances, their patience obviously wearing thin. They didn't have poker faces, so we could tell something was very wrong, maybe worse than what they were letting on. The signs rolled by and told us the next town was coming into sight, 40 miles away. As the sun began to set, we finally arrived at our rest stop for the evening, a lonely hotel in the middle of nowhere. There was a town, but the hotel itself was kind of on the fringes, the outskirts of it. The building loomed before us, its neon sign creaking in the wind. We checked in. A strange woman caught my eye, her hair long and tattered, clothes in stark contrast to the sterile hotel lobby. She paced back and forth in the hallway, her eyes fixed on some unknown point. "Who's that?" Sophie whispered, her voice full of curiosity. I leaned to hear the answer. This woman had caught my eye, was making me feel uneasy. As I looked over, I found her now staring bullets back at us, as if we'd done something wrong to her. I remember freezing in place and just looking down at my feet when her eyes met mine. "It's just another guest, honey," my mother replied, her tone dismissive. That was that. We unloaded what we needed out of the car and went to our room, which had 2 queen-size beds that we would all be sharing. As we moved through the hall, we caught sight of that woman again, who was still pacing and glaring at everything in the halls and lobby. She was unsettling, but once we closed and locked our door, I really didn't think about her again. We settled into our room, the car's trouble seemed to fade away into the background, but that feeling of unease still lingered, the sense that something was definitely off. The hotel's isolation, that strange woman's eerie presence, and the car's unreliable performance all combined to create this brooding sense of dread. It felt like something was for sure about to go wrong, or already had, we just needed to walk into it. I remember just staring at the ceiling beneath the glow of the bubble TV, playing some sitcom rerun that I can't remember now. There were footsteps down the hall, a hushed pitter-patter, and then I was asleep. I had strange dreams, but nothing weird happened while we were in the room. We awoke and ate a free continental breakfast, one of my favorite features of these long road trips as a kid. What's better than unlimited milk and cereal? As we packed up to leave the next morning, the car barely started, its engine coughing and sputtering like a dying animal. My father's face darkened with frustration, while my mother tried to reassure us that we'd be finding a mechanic soon. But as we hit the road once more, I couldn't help but wonder, were we driving toward our destination or into some unknown trouble? The car limped along the desert highway, its engine sputtering and coughing with every single mile. My father's face was set in this determined grimace, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but it was no use. With a final groan, the car coasted to a stop on the side of the road. We all sat there in stunned silence, the only sound the ticking engine as it cooled down. My father finally spoke up, his voice laced with frustration. "Well, it looks like we're stranded." My sister and I were in disbelief, staring at the heat waves rising off the highway ahead of us. This was truly uncharted waters for us, being stuck on the side of the highway. I turned around and saw no one for miles in the opposite direction, totally isolated, and the town we left behind was probably 20 miles away. Dad rolled up his sleeves, climbed out of the driver's seat, popped up the hood, and inspected the engine, his face crunched up in concentration. After a few minutes, he straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Need to get some tools and maybe a new part for the engine. I'll have to go find help." My heart sank at his words. We were miles from that last town, and who knew when another car would pass by. My father was always so resourceful, so I had faith he'd figure something out. As the minutes ticked by, my mother began to fret. "How long will you be gone, though, dear? We don't have much food or even water." My father hesitated, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I'll try to find somebody to give me a ride to the next town. If not, I'll just be back as soon as I can." He took one of our half-empty water bottles, put a hat on his head, and started right down the highway. I think we were on the Washington border, so it was hot and rugged out there. Dad looked back every few minutes and waved until he slowly disappeared over the closest hill. Couldn't see him anymore after that. My mom entertained us the best she could. Games, riddles, all kinds of different stuff. She even knew a magic trick that she showed us with a quarter. Still, we were worried and getting hotter than hell inside that car. We had to take shifts getting out of the stiff air, only to get burned up out in the sun. A lose-lose situation, but we didn't have any other option. The hours dragged on, our concern quickly turning to fear. The sun beat down on us, relentless in its intensity. We huddled together inside the shade of the car, our water bottles almost completely depleted. We did keep a reserve of one bottle, but promised not to crack it open until that night, or even the next day, whenever we seemed most desperate. Just as we were starting to lose hope, though, this rickety old sedan pulled up beside us. A stranger with a scruffy beard and a trucker hat peered out the window. "You folks need help." My mother's eyes narrowed, her hand instinctively reaching for her purse. "What kind of help?" My parents were very cautious people. They were my entire life. They truly believed in stranger danger, the whole 9 yards of being safe. We were desperate, but this guy was clearly strange, possibly dangerous, and he knew we needed a hand. In retrospect, I think my mom might have saved our lives that afternoon. The stranger smiled, his teeth crooked and yellow. "Can give you all a ride to the next town, or maybe even fix your car for you." My father's words echoed in my mind. We couldn't trust just anyone, but what choice did we have right now? We were stranded. No food, no water, and with no sign of rescue in sight. The stranger's eyes seemed to bore into ours, his smile growing wider. "Well, what do you say? You're gonna take a chance on me." The stranger's sedan creaked to a halt beside us, its engine squealing like a pig. He emerged from the driver's side, his eyes wild and unfocused. At first he did seem friendly, but as he approached the car, his demeanor just turned more aggressive. "Hey, it looks like you're in a bit of a pickle," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "My husband is going to be back any minute. He's got help on the way," my mom explained to him. I see. Well, like I said, I can drive you to go meet him. It's pretty brutal out here," he said. My mother's grip on my arm tightened as we retreated into the sweltering heat of our car. We locked the doors, hoping against hope that that stranger wouldn't find a way to break the windows. He laughed, a cold, mirthless sound, and began to tap on the glass. "You're gonna get baked to death in there. You know that. Just a few hours you'll be cooked like a bunch of rats in an oven." My sister whimpered, her eyes wide with fear, and I tried to reassure her in the moment, but my own voice was just shaking. I was going into shock at what was happening around us. Honestly, I kind of think I was already in shock, probably teetering on a heat stroke, but with a new situation it had me over the edge. I couldn't process the stuff that was being said. The fact that we had a barrier between us and this person, just like the broken down car, this was another situation that I was completely unprepared for. Just as things continued to escalate, a truck pulled up behind us, its engine roaring like a beast. Our father emerged from the passenger side, looking determined, looking like a goddamn movie hero. All of us nearly screamed with relief at the sight of him. The stranger's eyes then flicked to our father, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of fear in his. Then his face twisted into a snarl. He turned and ran back to his sedan, peeling out of there like a madman. He left us in a cloud of dust and terror. He didn't even bother saying a word to my father, which told us all we needed to know about him. In my older age, it's a very, very scary realization. Our father rushed to our car, his face completely pale. "Are you guys okay? What the hell just happened?" We all stumbled out of the car, our legs shaking like jelly. My mother embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we were going to die," she sobbed. All of us were red like boiled lobsters, sweat dumping down our faces. As we watched that stranger's sedan disappear off into the distance, I realized that our father had returned just in time. Whatever weirdness had been about to occur, he had prevented it. We got the car patched up with the help of an old man my dad had come across on the road. He drove him to town, helped him secure the tools and supplies needed, and then drove him back to our car. He'd gotten us back on the road and gave us good directions to the next hotel. We thanked him endlessly and never saw either of those people again. The rest of the road trip had this pretty weird vibe, especially for my mom. The memory of that stranger's wild eyes and menacing grin will haunt me forever. The desert, once a place of beauty and wonder, had now become a place of horror inside my head.